Hi, I'm Kimberly Washburn, Curator of Education at the Florence County Museum. Welcome to December's holiday Family Day at Home. Today I'm going to show you how to make your own unique, one-of-a-kind wrapping paper to wrap gifts for your family and friends. You're going to need to gather a few things from your Family Day at Home kit. You're going to need your roll of wrapping paper. It's rubber banded into a tube. You're going to need your paper plate, your cup of black paint. Your paint swab might be useful here. It's not necessary, but you can definitely use it. Your compressed sponge. And you're also going to need to gather a few things from around the house. It will be helpful to have some tape. Any kind of tape will do. You don't necessarily have to have this, but this will help you keep your wrapping paper in place while you work on creating it. You might like to use a pencil. You'll need some scissors, and you'll need some water. Now, you don't have to use a cup of water like I am today. You can just take your sponge over to the sink to wet it when it's time, but I'll be doing that with a cup for our demonstration today. Okay, so our first step is going to be to get our wrapping paper all laid out. Just gonna get this rubber band out of the way. And you will have about 1 yard of wrapping paper. So about 36 inches of wrapping paper, just like that. Now, the edges might be curling up a little bit because it's been rolled. And so this is where your tape comes in handy. Just gift wrapping tape works well for this, or I'm using masking tape because that's what I had on hand. But I'm just gonna tack it down in the corners. Just tacking my wrapping paper down in the corners. So it's not laying quite flat for me here. Just gonna get it positioned so that it's nice and flat. And this corner. Okay. So now my wrapping paper is secured on the table and I'm ready to create a design that I would like to use for my wrapping paper. Now, this piece of sponge you have is very, very flat. It's called compressed sponge. And it works very well to draw right on your sponge. So I have gone ahead and drawn a holly leaf with some holly berries on my sponge. Now you want to try to use up as much of the sponge as you can. Your design, if you only use a very small piece, your design on your wrapping paper will be very, very small. So try to go ahead and use as much of the space as you can. The next step before you ever wet your sponge is to cut out the design that you created. So I'm just going to cut out carefully and slowly along the drawing that I've created. Now this drawing could be anything. It could be Christmas trees, you could do the shape of a snowman. It works better if you choose something that's nice and simple. The shape needs to be recognizable on its own. You'll notice I don't have any little details drawn into this. That's because the sponge will not show any small details. So make sure that your design, whatever you choose to do, is bold and that outside shape is recognizable. So the shape of a snowman or a Christmas tree, something like that might work really nicely. Also, if you have too much detail, it's a little tricky to cut out. All right, so I've cut out my holly leaf. I'm gonna move my scraps to the side. A little bit of sponge dust there. And I also have some holly berries here. These might be a little bit small for me to cut out and just a little tricky. Take your time when you're cutting. The sponge is thick and can be difficult to cut through. If you're having trouble cutting, then ask a grown-up to help you cut through the sponge. You draw the design and ask your grown-up to help you with the cutting. Okay, So our next step is going to be to wet the sponges. When we wet the sponges, they're gonna pop up and open just like a regular kitchen sponge. So it's gonna look and feel more like a sponge once we've wet it. So I'm gonna take my compressed sponge and just set it in the water, and I can watch it just expand into what looks like just a normal sponge. It's a little bit more than 1/2 inch thick. And I wanna squeeze all the water out of it. I don't want it to be a squishy wet sponge. That's where your paper towel comes in. Also get my holly berries wet. There we go. Okay, I'm done with the water. That's all you need the water for. So if you're going to be, you can just wet these sponges under your kitchen sink. You don't have to get a container of water, but for the purpose of this demonstration, that worked best for us. Okay, so now I have a sponge in the shape of a holly leaf and a holly berry, or a little clump of holly berries, and I'm going to start printing them onto my wrapping paper. So let's grab the supplies that we'll need for that. You're going to need your cup of black paint and your paper plate. I'm going to be using my paint swab to get some of the paint onto the plate. It helps to get it out. You don't have to do this, but it is helpful. Try to get as much off of there as possible. Set that paint cup to the side. All right. And I like to keep my paper towel nearby. Your hands may get messy when you're doing this, so it's always nice to be able to wipe them off a little. Okay, so I'm going to start with my holly leaf. My holly berry is kind of like the detail, so I'll add that later. And I'm going to start just by dipping my sponge into the paint a little bit and dabbing it onto a part of the plate where there's no paint. This just helps spread out the paint evenly and make sure I don't have any big globs of paint. When you do this, you want a nice even coat of paint on your sponge, but you don't want any big gloopy globs, because that will just leave big gloopy globs on your wrapping paper. Okay. So I like to start in the center and work my way out, but if you wanted to start in a corner and work your way across, or start on the left and work your way right, you can do that as well. I just like to start in the center because it helps me kind of decide how I want to place my pattern throughout my wrapping paper. So I'm going to start kind of in the middle and stamp one of my holly leaves. Now I'm not pressing down really hard, I'm just giving a gentle press, and then I'm going to lift up. And there's the shape of my holly leaf. And I want these to be like a little group of holly leaves. So I'm going to do another one. You'll notice I didn't dip it in the paint again because I didn't need to. See, I can get several clean stamps out of one dip in the paint. So now I have my little group of holly leaves there. I'm going to come back over to my plate. Make sure I have a nice even coat. I think I want to put my next grouping right here. Just gonna stamp it, lift it straight up, set it down, stamp it, lift it straight up, just like that. And I'm just gonna continue with this until I have covered my wrapping paper with my pattern. Now, I had a little bit of paint on my hands and I just got it on my wrapping paper. I'm not gonna try to clean that off the wrapping paper because I'm really likely to spread it, and it's less noticeable as just one little dot. So I'm gonna just leave that where it is. But do keep wiping your hands. You'll notice that as you're handling the sponge, your hands will get a little bit messy, and that's okay. Stop and wash them if you need to, and then come back to it. Your prints may have a little bit of texture to them because the sponge has a texture, but I think that makes the wrapping paper a little bit more dynamic than just plain old wrapping paper that you can buy at the store. That's what makes it look like something that you've taken the time to make. So I'm just going to keep doing this. And I might even be able to get a few more stamps. If you notice that you're seeing a lot of red paper through your stamp, you'll know it's time to put more paint on it. But it looks like I have gotten 4 very nice clean stamps with that one dip into the paint. I'm gonna do that again. And maybe one more here. Now you're going to want to try to fill up your entire sheet of wrapping paper. This is enough wrapping paper to wrap one good-sized gift, or if you have several small gifts, you could also wrap them with this. Now I'm going to come to my little detail sponge that I cut out, my little holly berries. I'm going to go ahead and dip that sponge into the paint now. And I'm going to add just one little cluster of holly berries at each of my groupings here. Oh, it looks like I might need some more paint. So if you see that you don't get a good stamp, get some more paint and you can go right back over it, just like that. And now I have some wrapping paper that is completely handmade by me to wrap gifts for my family and friends this holiday season. I hope you enjoy making your own wrapping paper along with us.